Vanessa putting into place. Moving quickly along, I would like to invite the second Vice President, Minister of Public Security, the Honorable Khemraj Ramjattan.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. And I know because of the time constraints, I'm not going to go through the normal protocols as I usually do. But suffice to say that I'm glad that I've seen lots of people here, very important people too, including our Chancellor, Chief Justice, Commissioner, members from the diplomatic corps and multilateral organizations that are assisting. A very good night to you, and I'm very happy indeed that we are having what I regard as another public awareness session in relation to juvenile justice. As you may be aware, only this year the Juvenile Justice Bill was debated in Parliament in April and passed, one of those very few bills that were passed unanimously in our National Assembly. And then of course, I think it was a month thereafter, it was assented to by President David Granger. The bill, as you know, had a big history. Suffice, however, to state that it is in accordance with a lot of the modern philosophical principles that underlie juvenile justice, namely those principles that come from what is regarded as the Beijing principles and the Riyadh set of guidelines. These were some major conferences held in those two countries in which a number of modern, very modern, up-to-date principles governing juvenile justice were centered, and they debated it and made it into declarations. And those declarations were more or less what became provisions in this very extensive act that we have now. I would hope that the lots of people who are involved in this are going to go through this. As to whether the question of a better life for youth will occur, certainly. There have been the abolition of a number of offenses which deal with crimes like truancy, runaways, vagrancy, wandering, all have been abolished now. And as you know, those crimes were largely as a result of a person's socio-economic circumstances. Simply because they're poor, or a girl is chased out of her home, she goes and sleeps in the pavement, a policeman could catch that girl and knock her, wandering. And it is also a set of crimes that are against age, in the sense of discrimination against young people. If an old person were to be sleeping on the pavement, police can't do anything. But a young person, that person could be discriminated and sent to the lockups. So that, again, is an improvement if you say, you know, indeed, there is going to be a better life for young people in relation to this matter of juvenile justice. But that is more or less an insignificant part of it, in my opinion. The other big amendment that we had that is in accordance with international obligations under those two settings, Riyadh and Beijing rules, had to do with the fact of upping the age of discretion, as it were, when you can do criminal activities and be charged for it. Previously, as you know, it was 10 years and below. There is a Latin word that we use, doli inque pax. A child of 10 years and below cannot commit a crime. So even if they steal or they do some criminal activity, you can't charge. From 10 to 13, if the child is of a mischievous discretion to be determined by the magistrate, that child could be charged. In the amendment that we've had in this new bill, it is now 14. But we have done something because we did not want necessarily to indicate that people from say 10 to 14 can't commit crimes. There are some very serious offenders at that age. What we have done, however, is to look at the international set of principles that govern these situations And we internationally imitated with a combination of local invention, and we came up with a rebuttable presumption that a child between below 14, it's a rebuttable presumption that they could commit a crime. So if indeed you have a child, say 13, doing something wrong, at that age there must be an assessment, psychological assessment of the child and all of that to ensure that indeed she knew from right from wrong, and that then she could or he could suffer a prosecution or a charge. That's the little difference that we have. But generally, there will be a presumption that you are incapable of committing crimes once you're 14 and below. It's a fundamentally a big advancement here for Guyana. I also want to say that as against what used to happen before, and by the way, that was a 1931 law that we had taken from England, 1931 Juvenile Offenders Act. We now have this 2018 Act. But inside there have new arrangements for looking after from the very inception. So assuming that someone is held up, arrested for some juvenile, a juvenile that is, for some offense, that person, young person, we start off with having diversionary measures to ensure that that person is not incarcerated or suffer imprisonment. As a matter of fact, the Act makes it quite clear. You cannot now, no juvenile in this country can be suffering anything like imprisonment. And that is why we have to have a host of budgetary allocations, a host of measures, and temporary housing facilities, and a number of things, including reconfiguration of our social programs so that they can avoid imprisonment, but also they can be taken care of in a setting that is outside of that very harsh setting of imprisonment. Diversionary measures too, as part of what the juveniles can be. The penalty usually was before imprisonment or a fine or some such thing. But we have a lot of diversionary measures now in the Act that could ask the court could, or the police officers could indicate, please apologize to the person that you have done the wrong to, instead of going to court. Even the DPP could arrange that kind of referral for an apology to be made or compensation to be made. You see, we didn't want our young people to be in a jailhouse kind of setting. We want them outside there, and this was a realistic, rational, sensitive, and I think sensible situation in which we will take care of our children. Indeed, to make life better for them will cost plenty, and as a matter of fact, and I thank UNICEF for this, the costing that we have come up with is almost $590 to $600 million to do the temporary shelters, the temporary facilities, the training of those professional people, and a whole host of things will come up $600 million. Now, we are not yet gaining from the oil and gas sector revenue stream that we so we have to, I'm absolutely certain that we're going to get there one day where we can have the maximal amounts that we wanted. But I rather suspect this year's budgetary allocation for that can't meet that very high amount. So we're going to have probably far less than that. But whatever it is, it's going to be a good start. And to that extent, then, we are going to ensure that we have some temporary facilities, so that instead of putting them in lockups at the police station and all these arrangements that are very harsh and conditions are extraordinarily appalling sometimes, we have to ensure that our young people move from that kind of scenario. It is very, very important. It is also important too that we in this country make sure that our children, our children, although they might have committed wrong, do not become graduates. Like when they are sent to prison or the police lockups, what we have found is that they learn lots more wickedness and mischief there. They graduate. And we have to avoid that. So the further we keep them away from that setting, the better. And so I want people to know that the very big advancement made by legislation, and by the way, this legislation was there since 2004, when the United Nations Human Rights Children's Committee, I think it was, had made some recommendations, but that's lapsed and lapsed and lapsed. And after, there was a change in 2015, we decided that we have to fast track this thing, and so it has been done. I want to say those kinds of legislative arrangements have indeed gone a far way, and it might not make life better, but it's going to improve it. Thank you very much.